to talk about that later. But I want to thank the director for moving on that. And also we might consider adding a raised crosswalk. That is one spot where when people see the traffic light, they don't look for the pedestrians and they gun it because they want to make that green light. And that's, if they have to gun it over a raised crosswalk, they're going to notice. So that might be a really good place to put a raised crosswalk because it's mid-block.
All right. Thank you, Commissioner Hanson. Yes, that was a necessary thing. I feel good that we're able to do that. So thank you for your comments. That will take us then on to the agenda. Any concerns or comments about the agenda?
Madam President.
Director Wong, did you want to speak to that?
Yes, I did. Please. Thank you. Commissioners, as I indicated to you earlier today, we have solved and come to a mutual agreement on the condemnation issue that you deferred for 1 week last week. The parties were in the building today. We have signed copies across the board. Mr. Wallace has dyed his hair back to its normal color based on all the things that he went through. But our right-of-way team and the general counsel did a tremendous job on making this work. So we are done with this. Checks will go out shortly to a couple. Paul and his team are doing a great job on trying to fast track this. That being said, so I'm going to ask that you just defer or refer back to staff indefinitely item number 1 on the regular agenda. When you get to your motion, it's done. Everything's been solved.
Good news. Glad to hear we got resolution on that. Thank you very much. And then without any other comments from commissioners, Director Wong, we'll turn it over to you and your ops report.
Okay, just a few things, commissioners. Good morning. First off, I'd like to let you know that that we are, as I indicated earlier, we're have some tremendous forward progress. Gary's team in traffic operations is doing a great job on moving forward on the Red Before PED operational actions you allowed us to take during this budget session. I think we're up to 55 or 59 intersections that have already been changed. I've been sending you the update of the locations. Nicole and her team are going to do a blog blast here in the near future to let everybody know where these are, how they're working. But so far, we're getting just great reports back from our operators, and of course, absence of complaints is always a great signal of support and such in this. So that's just a great initiative. I want to thank you again for supporting this initiative. One of the things that we're going to be working through here in the next couple of weeks, of course, is the schools issue. As you know, in Ada County, of course, across Idaho, with the pandemic there and with the different health agencies, there are different perspectives of which school is going to do what, when, who's going to open where, those sort of things. So what we're going to be working internally here is how do we ensure that our team members are continually best supported with the growing challenges of maybe children still being at home for some time frame. There are different starting levels, and some schools are all doing virtual at this point as it is. So that will continue to have an impact on all operations, but I just want to let you know that we are going to be working through that, and again supporting the team members when it comes down to daycare, children in school, the current strategy of work at home, work at a district, those sort of things. And as I shared with a couple of members earlier this morning, it's my perspective that we're going to be in this at least for a year going forward. So the actions that we take operationally and through your guidance with policy is going to again affect the overall operations of the Ada County Highway District through next year. There's just no really getting around that as we move forward. So we'll be discussing that with our entire team here next week and such. We'll keep you posted across the board, but as I said earlier, we have to understand that the new abnormal, it's not the new normal, it's the new abnormal, is with us for some time as we move forward. You got a taste of it a little bit ago, and that is the upcoming legislative session. I'm going to ask all of you to please let us know what you believe is important from your leadership roles as to what the county, the district, should be approaching the legislature on in this session. I would really like to get those thoughts, either, of course, through Commissioner May as President, Commissioner Goldthorpe as VP, on what you'd like us to start that discussion with at certain levels. But I'd like to get those, if we can, like by next week, if that's possible. You had a great start today. You saw what we are looking at when it comes to the to impact fees, and there are a lot of that's a lot of hills to push, quite frankly, on some of the things we're looking at. But I would ask for your thoughts as to what you think the district should be standing up for with the upcoming legislature. And with that, Commissioners, that's all I have for you today. You have about 4.5 minutes before your next session, so I'm ready for any questions you might have.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Goldthorpe.
Yes, I have just a thought to express, and it has to do with the support for our team and their families and their kids at home and the whole school garbage that's going on because of the pandemic. And pardon my bluntness, but I worry about us because of this year or 2 year problems with education, raising a generation of morons. And we're having a hard enough time competing internationally as it is in terms of scholastics and the results that we achieve here in the United States. And I'm wondering if there isn't some way that we can support our staff and their children by helping even funding, because we have different things we fund that we're not funding this year, like all our parties and stuff, that we can fund some tutorial help for them. And I'm sincere when I say that.
Commissioner May, Commissioner Goldthorpe, it's funny that you would raise that, because that is and has been a topic of discussion amongst several members of the executive team already. We're not ready yet to come forward and say these are some good things that we should do, but I think we're one of very few that have been very specific on tracking different areas of where our team members are working, how we're supporting them through the CARES Act, the Family First Act, and such. But again, the sky's the limit on this. But you are right, in my opinion. This is going to be a challenge for all organizations going forward, and as we've done in the past, we'd kind of like to lead the way on it. So again, understand that, and we'll be back to the Commission shortly with some ideas on this.
Very good. Look forward to having that discussion. Thank you. Any other questions or comments for Director Wong? Just have a couple minutes.
Madam President, just to
Commissioner Hanson.
clarify, the special session is limited by law to the specific issues that the governor has identified in his order. So a lot of things we would want to talk about, we can't, because it's not within the governor's power. He would have to issue another order, and I'm sure he doesn't want to do that. So I think to the extent that we have a lot of issues we'd love to raise, they're mostly with the general session that would be convening in January.
Commissioner May, Commissioner Hanson, yes, that's what I'm referring to, not this special session. As all of you know, homework takes time, and we want to assure that we are starting that process early and getting your thoughts in front of the key legislators, to our lobbyists and such early, so that we can continue to lead that tune, so to speak. That's why I think it's important for the senior leadership to let us know what you think is the key things going into this the general session that you'd like us to champion through our lobbyists, of course through you, and such, in some of the other contacts that we're able to reach out to.
Absolutely. Focus is the general session, and we'll try to get our comments to you then, all commissioners, by next Wednesday. All right. Thank you very much. Any other questions or comments?
Just that it might take a little bit longer than that. So I would say maybe by the end of the month.
Whenever you get them into us, Mr. Hanson, sooner the better. Thank you. 2 minutes. Don't go far.
Don't go far. And just to make sure that tomorrow, next week's meeting, the 19th, is a night meeting for the
Yes.
adoption of the CIP,
Yeah.
as well as the 4th for the adoption of the budget.
Good reminder. So we'll have 2 night meetings this month. Good. All right. Thanks, everyone. About a minute and a half to go.
Director Wong, it is noon.
Thank you. Commissioner May, you've heard our official timekeeper and such. It is noon.
We're ready? All right. Thank you very much. Welcome, everyone. I will now call our August 12th commission meeting to order. And Director Wong, if you would please lead us in the pledge.
Would you please stand and follow me? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Justice for all. All right, thank you very much. Today we have somebody very special that we would like to recognize. We are honoring Allie Klinger. She's ACHD headquarters receptionist for her unwavering commitment to first-class customer support across the board, her outstanding professionalism, and her absolute grace in being the voice and the staff ambassador for ACHD to the many citizens that call or visit our headquarters. Allie has been with the district for 10 years, and sadly next Monday, sad for us, we're happy for her, will be her final tour of duty as she will be joining her husband in retirement. Allie, thank you for all that you have done for so many of us. Thank you for your passion for ACHD, your calming influence in a very challenging environment, and for your sense of humor. Everybody's going to miss that. Thank you for being you and unquestionably keeping us at the A+ level of service that everyone has come to expect from us. We wish you the absolute best in your upcoming retirement and in the next chapter of your life. We'll miss you. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in congratulating and thanking Allie. All right, our first item is to adopt our agenda. Is there a motion?
Yes,
So moved. Second.
Are we going to make a motion here to
Yep, we did, and it was seconded too.
pull the item?
Oh,
No, just to adopt the agenda, and then when we get to that item, remand
You'll
it.
just remand it? Okay.
Yeah.
I was hoping we could just do that right at the beginning. All right, all in favor?
aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right, motion carries. Consent agenda. Items on the consent agenda are considered to be routine and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion on these items unless a commissioner or citizen so requests, in which case the item will be removed from the consent agenda and placed on the regular agenda. All consent agenda items are commission action items unless noted. Is there a motion?
Madam President, I move we approve the consent agenda.
All right, motion. Is there a second? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Regular agenda. One item on the regular agenda, condemnation of right-of-way necessary for Maple Grove Road, Victory Road to Overland Road, Parcel 10-2570 South Maple Grove Road, Boise, Idaho 83709. Authorization and order of condemnation.
Madam Chair, I would
Go ahead,
move that
Commissioner
we
Baker.
remand this item back to staff as it has been settled with the property owner.
All right, we have a motion. Is there a second?
That.
All right, a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, hearing none, motion carries. And congratulations to all parties. It's always good when we can achieve a resolution like this, and especially so quickly. All right, so no other items on our regular agenda. That takes us down to public communications. Ms. Spencer, do we have anyone signed up to address the commission?
We do not.
All right. Anybody that's just on for the meeting that would like to comment? All right. Hearing none. That was a short meeting. We stand adjourned. All right. Our post-commission agenda, we can just move straight into that. Our first presentation will be the State Street Alternative Routes and Bus Stops presentation from VRT, a presentation by Mr. Stephen Hunt. Welcome, Stephen.
Thank you, Commissioners. Glad to be here. And I am
Front and center.
getting the presentation up on the screen now, I hope. Not yet.
Yeah, I can see it.
You can see it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to be here again. And just wanted to, this afternoon, provide an update on where we are with the State Street alternatives analysis and answer any questions about that project. So I'm going to advance the slide here if I can. The purpose of this study was to look at alternatives connecting the west end of State Street. So we're looking at State and Whitewater to Main Street Station in downtown Boise. And there are a number of different pathways that we are reviewing through this study. The result of it is to analyze those alternatives and develop a preferred alternative for the long-term alignment that we would like to maintain for transit between State and Whitewater and downtown Boise. Background on the project, as I'm sure you're aware, the State Street is the highest ridership route in the Treasure Valley, and we have over the years been in the process of increasing service along that corridor. We added service later in the evening. We've increased the peak hour service, peak period service to be more frequent every 15 minutes. We will be extending service to Eagle this October. That was a planned service expansion that was delayed because of COVID. And we will also this October, we'll be extending weekend service to every 30 minutes. It's developed to be to be the highest ridership route and a core corridor for the Treasure Valley in relation to transit. It also is a central part of the State Street Transit and Traffic Operations Plan, the TTOP, which identifies State Street as a heavily emphasized transit corridor, and in the future would have as many as 8 to 10 buses an hour in the commute period. So the purpose again of this study is to help identify which of those paths between State and Whitewater and downtown Boise would be the ongoing path for us in the future to make this connection between this primary corridor and downtown Boise. This is the area where we experience the peak load on the corridor. So buses are the fullest as it moves through this section, and so the amount of time that we take and the destinations that we serve on this section are important to the success of the corridor. The project is being overseen by a project team or a committee that is actually a subcommittee of the State Street Technical Team. This is a group that we have convened over the years to continue to make progress on the State Street traffic and transit and traffic operations plan. And this, because this is a subsection of that entire corridor, we're using a subsection of that State Street technical team, which includes ACHD, Compass, City of Boise, VRT, and CCDC, because those are the jurisdictions that are most relevant to this study. The study area, as I mentioned, goes from State and Whitewater into downtown Boise. It extends a little bit on both the west and the east. We wanted to consider how it connects to services and the development that would be occurring around Boise State University. And we were looking at roughly a half-mile buffer on those corridors, taking into consideration the barriers created by the river. We have done an initial, the process includes two sets of screening. There was a first tier screening, which we've completed, and then a second tier screening. The first tier screening was intended to look at all the different alternatives and narrow those down from, we started with 4, narrow those down to 3 so that we could do some more robust analysis on the remaining 3 and conduct a second screening that includes modeling efforts on that subsection of all of the alternatives. The first tier looked at travel time and destinations served. It also looked at traffic conflicts, a number of signals that would be going through, and access to employment and residential locations. The second tier screening will include travel demand modeling, so we'll be looking at projected transit boardings, again, impacts on traffic operations, and the costs of some of the improvements that we would be identifying for that corridor to ensure the transit can move quickly through there, as well as the effectiveness of those investments. The first tier screening resulted in 3 alternatives moving forward, and that's one that stays on State Street, so from Whitewater all the way to downtown, as the current Route 9 serves the area on State Street. Second is using 27th to get down to Main and Fairview. And the third would be using Whitewater Boulevard to connect to Main and Fairview. And I'll take a quick review of each of those alternatives individually. So State Street this one is the one that's most familiar to everyone. It's the existing service. It actually has the least length of congested corridor as defined by the miles of corridor that are at 75% of capacity. And it has connections to some of the larger employment and destinations of the Idaho Capitol, as well as some of the state office buildings downtown, and connects to the employment and residential centers along State Street. The 27th alignment goes State Street down to 27th. This has the advantage of having actually the fastest travel time of the 3, taking advantage of the higher speeds on Main and Fairview, has the fewest destinations of the 3. When we looked at the first tier screening, they actually all performed quite closely. We're talking about a minute or more or less of difference in terms of travel time, and the destinations are just outside of what walking would be between the 3 of them. But comparatively speaking, this one had fewer destinations, but it did open up some of the population and employment centers, more of the employment centers on Main and Fairview. And then the last alternative is Whitewater Park Boulevard, which has the fewest signals, has the highest speeds, but is longer in length, and it actually ended up being the longest in terms of travel time between the 2 ends. Had a little bit less congestion than the 27th corridor, and that's largely because of traffic on 27. So those are the 3 alternatives that we will be doing more analysis on, and specifically what we're looking at are the types of priority treatments that would be considered to ensure that we are able to move more people through the corridor. And so there are 3 different alternatives or treatment types that wanted to present to you that we will be evaluating. Again, this is in conjunction with our work with Compass staff, working with Marianne on modeling, and ACHD staff in terms of traffic considerations. So the first I wanted to mention is a Q bypass lane. So this would be an area where the bus would be able to bypass. So that the Q bypass part is approaching an intersection using either existing right-of-way in the right via the right-hand turn lane to get around traffic to the head of the line, and then using the signal to come back into traffic far side of the intersection. This allows the transit vehicle to move through the intersection more quickly, and we would be looking at applying this type of treatment at a number of intersections where there might be existing right-of-way space to take advantage of that right-hand turn lane. There are a number on State Street, in particular, that we would be looking at applying that type of treatment on. Another variation of this would be, again, using existing right-of-way. So it wouldn't look exactly like this. I use this image just to illustrate the fact that there are some locations that we would be looking at where we might be repurposing existing right-of-way, in particular a median space that could create an extra lane, in essence, as you approach an intersection to prioritize transit movements through that corridor. So this wouldn't be expanding the roadway, as this image kind of indicates, but it would be carving out space along existing right-of-way where you'd be able to use that space to help transit move through that intersection. And they would be useful in locations where there is signal delay, and helping the bus get to the head of the line and improve the speed of service. There are a couple of locations where this type of treatment could make some sense, and we'd be exploring using the existing right-of-way in that way. Another treatment that we wanted to look at is peak period parking restrictions. So we are working with our other partners in the team, including the City of Boise and CCDC, to look at what the impact might be of doing parking restrictions. In this case, the example would be on 9th Street, where in the peak period you might restrict parking on one side of the street and make that space available for transit or HOV vehicles so that they could move through that corridor with less congestion. Again, it just would be period parking restrictions, time period parking restrictions, and that we are working with our city partners on understanding the impact that would have. The last alternative that we were looking at is exploring the use of different turning restrictions. So this might be on State Street, where we would require look at what the impact would be of doing a right only on a current through lane. This would divert traffic onto parallel routing, and you would apply this where there's already heavy right-hand turn traffic. The result would be reserving space on the through movements for transit to help move traffic or move transit through the corridor more efficiently. It also could help, particularly on the State Street side, as it becomes more pedestrian, to discourage through traffic on that street and maintain the capacity, however, of that corridor by prioritizing transit movements through there. So these would be things that we would be studying what the impact of these types of treatments would have, both on transit as well as on general purpose traffic. We're working again with Compass and ACHD in terms of how those things would impact all different traffic. And then the next steps would be the results of those analyses would inform which of those alternatives perform better in terms of the ridership and access, as well as impacts to general purpose traffic. We also will be doing some public outreach during this fall to get comments from the public on their preferences for the three remaining alternatives. the result of all of this being the recommendation for a locally preferred alternative, or an alignment that we would agree becomes our focus for investments on transit between those two destinations of Whitewater and State and downtown Boise, where we would be looking to build that high capacity transit or higher quality transit connection. So that was what I wanted to share with you, make sure that you were aware of the work that we're doing with partner agencies and just and your staff, and see if there are any questions or comments.
Thank you, Stephen. Appreciate the update. I do have, I think, a major reservation about the 27th Street alternative. I'm sure you know the Whitewater project. The purpose of that was to divert that vehicular traffic over to Whitewater. And there was some reconfiguration that took place on 27th Street, so just the two lanes. And so I'm just not sure this really bluntly passes the common sense test to then now have buses whipping down 27th Street every 15 minutes. So I really question perhaps having this as one of the alternatives, and I'd be curious as to the thought process that went into that.
Thank you. And the alternatives that we ended up looking at, and that's, so basically you have two approaches to downtown from State Street. One is staying on State, and one is trying to use Main and Fairview. And so the alternatives that we looked at were, but to get to Main and Fairview, you've got to use one of the couple of north-south connections there, Whitewater 27th and 23rd. And so when we were looking at those alternatives, obviously 27th and 23rd have some disadvantages relative to Whitewater in terms of the roadway, the number of lanes, and also the amount of connections that are available on Main and Fairview. In other words, if you wait too long, then you don't gain anything by getting down to Main and Fairview versus sticking on to 27th.
I just think the configuration of 27th Street, it's so narrow. You have that turn lane down the middle, and now to have buses going every 15 minutes, it's safety. It's really a safety issue in my mind, and a little counter to the whole objective of trying to divert that traffic over to Whitewater. So I would have some major reservations about that. So I just wanted to share that with you. Any other commissioners have any questions or comments?
Yeah, Madam President.
Commissioner Baker.
Yeah, thanks. So regarding the transit priority options, the Q bypass lane, wouldn't it make more sense to study buses stopping after the intersection instead of before it? And that way you don't have to worry about, trying to get stuck behind a light or something, or stacking up a bunch of people behind you at the light. So make the bypass lane, in fact, after the intersection.
Thank you, Madam President. The Q bypass lane could work with either a near side or a far side stop configuration. The idea of the bypass is actually to get around traffic that might be stacking up prior to the intersection. And so you could either make the stop there, or you could continue across the intersection and make the stop on the far side, which is what we would be pursuing on almost all of the stops in these scenarios, where we have a preference for far side stop. This image does show an near side stop, that you could put one far side and still take advantage of the Q bypass lane. You just need to make sure you've got room on the far side to make that stop. So that is being considered.
Okay, and then have you guys done, this has been going on, this bus on State Street configuration has been going on an awfully long time. So do you have any data on, in terms of the three different configurations of where this State Street bus line is going to end up, which I assume is down at the bus thing under the bank? Do you have any idea, any data on who actually rides the bus, where they go? not only those that do it now, but those that you might want to be able to encourage to ride the bus. I mean, it seems to me that's exactly the type of data you want. Do you have that?
Madam President, we do have information now on where people are getting on and off. We have an old survey from 2014 and 2015 that has more OD types of comparisons, and we will be doing a new onboard survey, which will include some origin and destination information this coming year in FY 2021.
So I don't see how you can make any decisions without having that data that's more relevant than 2014, particularly with what's happening with the coronavirus. But also, even if we didn't have the virus, I just don't see how you can rely on data from 6 years ago or 7 or 8 by the time you finally get it done to make any decisions on how to pick a route. It just doesn't, I don't see how that works.
Madam President, the data that we would be using would be more focused on development, both employment and residential development, which we do have much more recent data on, and then applying the regional demand models as well as which have mode share choice or mode share component to them to get estimates in terms of what ridership would look like among the alternatives. And
no, I get that, you know, you're going to do all that, but the thing is, don't you need that information in place before you choose one of the 3 routes? I mean, you know, just because you're putting people, you know, just because you're building up density along State Street does not by any means mean that those people are going to actually ride the bus. So it seems to me you would want to know who rides the bus, where they go, who would ride the bus depending on where it goes, to make those kinds of decisions. But that's just me. Maybe you need something different. I don't know.
Madam President, we would be doing that analysis prior to, but come back down here, we'll be evaluating those alternatives, and based on, again, on the modeling and the origin, not the origin destination specifically of existing individuals, but certainly the location of current households and and employment centers, to determine which of those alternatives has an advantage over the other.
Well, no, I understand that. The point is, you've got a lot of people living in the city of Boise. You've got a lot of people living in Ada County, but no one's riding the bus. So it seems to me you would want to determine, and this is going to require outreach and this is going to require surveys, but you need to ask people, if the bus went here, would you ride it? Or go on the buses and say, what would you like? What route would you like better to get where you're going? I mean, all of these models, I don't think substitute for talking to actual people about their actual needs. But that, like I said, that's just me. So anyway,
Stephen, I do have one more question. What is your timeline for the outreach? When are you? I know it's hard to.
Yes, thank you, Madam President. We are scheduling to do our outreach this fall. I think October is the date that is the month that we'd be looking to do that. So we would be reaching out to the public to get their input on those corridors as Commissioner Baker suggested.
Okay. It will be interested to see how that all shakes out. Look forward to you coming back and sharing that information with us. It's good to know where they're all going to, and I would have the additional question of where are they coming from? Where do you see the significant onloading with the transit? That would be a good piece of information that I would be interested in hearing as well. So a lot of work. It was a good presentation. Mr. Price.
If I can, Stephen, has there been any discussion about expanding the scope of the project area further west to Gary Lane?
At this point, there there has not been a discussion about expanding the scope to Gary Lane. This specific study was intended to make the connection that was absent in the State Street Transit and Traffic Operations Plan, which was from Whitewater and State to the then future multimodal center in downtown Boise. So the location of that multimodal center has long since been determined. Main Street Station. What we hadn't done, though, was define exactly the routing between the end of the T-top, Staten and Whitewater, and the multimodal center in downtown Boise. And so that's what this study was intended to do.
Okay, Madam President, just as a follow-up, are you doing any studies around the Pierce Park area relative to transit stops? We've got a project there, and we're most certainly interested in the time schedule, if you're going to be doing that, and what that schedule would be.
Madam President, we do have a study that we anticipate getting underway this fall that would be looking more broadly at the State Street corridor, calling it the State Street Transit Operational Analysis, which was developed through the State Street technical team and the executive team as something that we needed to do to identify what near-term actions could be done to keep us moving forward on the State Street T-top for transit, and that would provide us an opportunity to look at Pierce Park, yes.
Okay, thank you, Steve, and Madam President, thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Hansen.
Yeah, thanks, Stephen. I was curious. At this point, it seems to me to make sense to leave all three options there and to move forward with an understanding of what it would be like to have those three options. People use transit when it is frequent and reliable. It goes late enough into the night. This is very much about the economic development and economic security of those businesses along there, both for their employees and their customers. And I would be reluctant to pick and choose to say the businesses on Whitewater or the businesses on 9th Street are a little more superior. I think people would be understanding if they say this route is going to the transit center via Whitewater, or this one is going via 27th or via the State House, and they know which bus to get on. And then they all come together on State Street and head west. So since this is really about economic development, the need for people to use it, be reliable, I think this would be a great thing to not just pick one route, but to say, let's make these work. So we have tons of data, lots of data here, and the modeling that's all over the country that says once you build them and they're reliable, they're frequent, they go into the evening, that data shows they're used. And I would just be reluctant to say, well, incrementally, it might be just a little bit quicker to skip 27th and skip Whitewater and go straight down to 5th Street. And then it's like, well, what about those businesses that could really benefit from having transit? If it's going to be coming down 10 buses an hour, 9 buses an hour, split them 3 and 3 down each way. So I would really encourage you not to push just because it's convenient to pick one model, but to see, okay, how would it work having all three? They're all going to the same destination, but the people on them are going to be getting on and off to businesses. And I think it actually would spur the kind of investment along those corridors that we haven't seen because we haven't had the frequent, reliable, into the evening transit services until just barely right now. And even right now, it's not fully done on Whitewater and 27th corridors.
Madam President?
Go ahead.
Thank you. I think it should be noted that while we are looking for an alternative for State Street, people should be aware that Main and Fairview is now and would remain an important transit corridor. We have services that serve Main and Fairview but they continue on up Fairview up the West Bench. Those areas would continue to have transit service. The focus of this was specifically about if we're if we are trying to move a high quality transit service from State Street into downtown Boise, what's the path that we're going to focus our efforts on to ensure that it is as fast and reliable as possible? So that's kind of the objective of this alternative, is to pick one from State Street making its way down. Where would we be focusing our efforts to ensure that it has the fastest, most reliable connection? It wouldn't necessarily preclude routing changes in the future of maybe complementary routes or other services that could serve Whitewater, beyond Whitewater or the other streets. But this would be focusing on how are we shaping that route that's coming from long ways down west on State Street into downtown Boise, carrying residents and employees into downtown Boise.
Very good. Thank you. Any other questions, commissioners? Stephen, good job. You've got a lot of work ahead of you. We appreciate you coming in and look forward to your future updates. It looks like Commissioner Goldthorpe has a comment.
Yep. The last few months I've been still reading the subscriptions that I've had when I was on the BRT board, and I understand that with the rebound in vehicular traffic since the stay-at-home orders have been rescinded and businesses have been, faring better, that the vehicular, the bicycle, and pedestrian traffic has been making a pretty good comeback, but not transit. Have you guys had very much discussion as to how you're going to overcome that?
Madam President and Commissioner Goldthorpe, yes, we have had a number of conversations about what we need to be doing to position ourselves to come out of this in a better place. And we will be launching a campaign immediately called Safe Travels, and Safe Travels Treasure Valley. This is a joint effort actually with ACHD Commuter Ride, City Go, Valley Regional Transit, all focused on informing the public of the steps that VRT and other public transportation providers are doing to ensure the safety of the riding public. So that will be a visible campaign to share with the public of the additional cleaning, the driver barriers that have been put in place, the steps that we've taken to ensure that people are able to ride in a safe way. We have seen since when there was the closure, we saw a big decline in ridership. As things opened back up, we saw ridership start to come back. I can get back to you on the most recent ridership results. We are not at pre-COVID levels by any means, but there has been some response since the nadir of travel restrictions in terms of additional transit ridership.
Okay.
I can get more detail on that.
Thank you, Stephen. Any other questions?
Madam President, as long as we have Stephen here and commuter ride got brought up, did you ever figure out the large urban dollars that have gone to commuter ride since 2017? Did any of them go to commuter ride since 2017?
Thank you, Madam President. Commissioner Baker, I did look into that, and I apologize for not getting a formal response back to you yet. But we did look at those dollars, and you're correct that the small urban dollars are the ones that have been used in large part to do some of those vehicle replacements, and there was some discussion about commuter ride joining the public transportation transit asset management program, which would put the replacement vehicles into that same category. And there have been some issues with that approach in the sense that there's a whole lot of transit asset management needs and vehicle replacement needs. And so we are working with commuter ride specifically on finding a way to ensure that all of our different business all of the different lines of business have the means that they need to continue to operate. But that's an ongoing conversation, and you're correct about the distribution of dollars to date.
Okay, well, they do need to have funding in place no later than fiscal year 22, about $275,000 that would allow them to replace those vehicles. And if they go past their useful life, then the program doesn't succeed. And if the program doesn't succeed, then realistically, there's no point in having ACHD have that as a function. So hopefully, you guys will look at taking that large urban dollars and just spreading it around a little bit, because they do transit too, just in a different way. Thank you.
Madam
All
Chair,
right.
I have a
Thank
comment.
you, Stephen. Oh, all right, Commissioner Arnold.
Thank you. I share the concerns about 27th Street, and I'm wondering if the team has reached out to the neighborhood associations in the area to let them know that this alternative is being considered, and solicit their input as well.
Stephen, that'll probably be part of your outreach, all
Yes.
the areas.
Madam President, Commissioner Baker, we'll make sure to reach out to 27th in our outreach this October to get their input on those alternatives.
Absolutely. That's a critical part of any project. Thank you. All right. All right, no further questions. You're off the hook, Stephen.
Thank you all.
Good
Pleasure.
job. We appreciate it. A lot of good information, and we'll look forward to you coming back with further updates.
Thank
So,
you.
Thank you. All right.
Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye. Thank you. Next, we have a traffic calming information briefing by Josh Sack. Mr. Sack, welcome. Takes a minute just to switch over the screens. There we go.
Josh, are you muted?
Madam President,
We can't hear. Mr. Enselman?
Josh, can you unmute yourself, please?
Is that better?
Yes.
Yes, now we can hear you.
Can you start over?
Welcome, Josh.
Oh, thank you. All right, so.
Thanks,
try that
Gary.
again. Thanks, Gary. So a little primer on traffic calming. First, we're going to talk about what is traffic calming, sort of the nuts and bolts of what it is we do when we get requests for such installations. A couple of years ago, we went through a survey to look at other agencies when we started to look at our existing policy to see how it shaped up. It was getting a little on the old side. Wanted to see what kind of current practices were. A little look at data collection, some of the new criteria that we've established going forward, in addition to maybe some perhaps beyond the speed hump ideas and alternatives. So what sort of traffic calming measures do we use? I mean, our policy is largely based off of speed humps and speed cushions. That's sort of the standard. That's what you see sort of in the bottom picture right there. We certainly work with other jurisdictions to make sure that it fits within the neighborhood confines, and we have different types and configurations of speed humps depending upon the classification of street. There are other measures that we can use. I've got a couple of examples that are shown there. We do use chicanes, which are more or less sort of bulb outs that are in the middle of a street, that narrows a street, that maybe perhaps causes a vehicle to slalom slightly when they travel down any sort of given neighborhood street. We use median islands. 15th Street, north of Ford up to Hill is probably one of our best examples and one of our most successful implementations of such traffic calming efforts. And then bulb outs, again, if you're looking at the top picture there, that's 12th and Jefferson. That's one we did about 6-7 years ago, right in the heart of downtown Boise, across from the Boise Inc. building. Obviously, when we start to talk about things like chicanes, things like bulb outs, those do entail a much larger effort, and they can be a whole lot more expensive than just your standard speed hump. And of course, anytime we start to go to a larger neighborhood context, we start to look at a larger consensus from that neighborhood itself. And certainly, we start talking about corridor level stuff. We're looking at commission approvals for kind of a capital project type installation. When we look at local considerations here, I mean, everybody knows we're a highway district, we're not a city. We don't set prima facie speed limits. That's sort of the default speed limit within any sort of jurisdiction or a city entity. So, for example, in the city of Boise, on local residential roads, they default to 20 miles an hour. Meridian, they default to 25. So any sort of traffic calming policy that we have really can't be based off of posted speed limit. Many jurisdictions do that. It just doesn't, it's not fair to base something off of something different for each entity. It doesn't make a lot of sense. Again, we take fire and police considerations. Emergency response is a big deal. And since Stephen was here, we also consult with our transit agency. Oftentimes, we'll be looking at a street that has a transit route on it. We certainly want to make sure that any sort of public bus we have isn't affected in any significant way. We do look at cut-through potential, kind of that non-local traffic that's going to use any one local street or a series of local streets that is not specific to that neighborhood. And we also look for commission approval when we look at the kind of, again, that higher level implementation. About 2015, 2016, we took a pretty significant look at peer cities. Our traffic policy, Terry Little was our previous traffic services manager. He brought a policy back when he started in the early 90s from Sacramento County. We were kind of in the range of 25 years using that policy, but we didn't have a lot of information as to sort of how that policy was working, who was qualifying. And we wanted to make sure that we were using sort of the best practices. Nothing is static over a course of 25 years. What we were finding is that our previous policy gave a significant credit to narrow roadways. So that means that there was a threshold that reduced the speed criteria. So when we look at speeds, we want to look at sort of that average speed. We were giving a significant credit to those narrower roadways. And what we were finding was that narrow roadway didn't have a significant impact, or the street width, I should say, didn't have an impact on the speeds we were getting back. And that was consistent pretty much throughout Boise, Meridian, Eagle, all the jurisdictions that we have. We did want to still retain that credit for lack of sidewalks. And when I say credit, that sort of reduces that speed threshold to be able to qualify for any sort of traffic calming measures. And our previous, we were looking at average speed within the peak hour, which was one of our previous. That was pretty limiting. We were finding we weren't getting a lot of good information just looking at 1 hour in any one day for a week's time. A lot of jurisdictions use a point system where they'll base certain things off of speed, off of volume, off of kind of public facilities. That didn't make a lot of sense to us to implement here because it was going to be difficult to explain that to the public, how that, okay, you have 12 points and you need 15 points. Well, how does that work? I don't quite understand. So something like that back and forth just didn't make a lot of sense to implement in this location. And some jurisdictions have that. I know that Chattanooga, Tennessee has something like that. They may use that well. I didn't see that really applying well here. And then we didn't have sort of that minimum threshold. We were having, it was rare, but we were evaluating a lot of streets that had sort of that 100, 200, 300 cars a day on it. You're looking at 20, 30 vehicles in a peak hour. A lot of jurisdictions kind of have a certain cutoff for a minimum threshold. We didn't have that, and we were also finding that some of those really low volume streets just really didn't have much of an issue. So we certainly took that into account as well. When we look at our current policy, we do currently take into account overall speeds, not just your peak hour. So we're looking at those vehicles that are traveling sort of that higher end of the scale. When we say higher end of the scale, we're looking at sort of an 85th and 95th percentile speed. So that's anybody who's going that top 15 or top 5% vehicles, how fast they're going. And then we're finding that sort of in that 30 to 35 mile an hour range. If we're starting to get to that threshold, we're seeing probably too many folks who are maybe going a little faster than they should on any given street. We look at volume in the peak hour. We established that at 100 cars within any 1 hour in 1 week for a local street, and then a sliding scale for a collector from 150 to 300. And that sliding scale is based off of the number of people who have direct access, so they have driveways off of the given road. You're going to find that probably in newer neighborhoods that are maybe 10 to 15 years old, where we've got pretty good access management on collectors entering any given subdivision, you're not going to have any driveways. So it's going to be a somewhat higher threshold than you would on, say, like an Irene Street in the North End where everybody is addressed off it. So that's going to have a lower threshold accordingly. We implemented the minimum ADT. All the jurisdictions that we looked at, of the lowest number that we found, 400 was the lowest, so we thought 400 was a good cutoff. In addition to looking at sort of those concerns associated with a primary response route for fire, for emergency services, and capping that at 4,000. So anything over 4,000 would not qualify. And we still maintain that any street that is not classified as an arterial also does not qualify, just based off of that emergency response. We implemented a minimum street length of 750 feet. Anything shorter than that, you really can't take advantage of having any sort of threshold. There's no real good place to put a traffic calming device in the middle that's going to have a significant impact on speeds. And then what we were finding is that we had a pretty high cut-through percentage. And the cut-through percentage that we use is that non-local traffic that is not part of that neighborhood. We were finding that the percentages that we had previously were very difficult to exceed. So we reduced those, and that's based off of sort of the number of vehicles entering the street. So we get a lot of questions and a lot of concerns about sort of the traffic calming efforts that we have if they're not effective. Well, we've got a couple of examples here where we've implemented kind of pre and post speed studies and volume studies, looking at 4 examples where we have done some before and after, and we have additional, but this is sort of a good primer. And we're looking at the average speed, the 85th percentile speeds. We get sort of that 15 to 25% reduction in average speed and in 85th percentile speed. And we tend to put our hoses, put our data collection points at the same spot so that we're collecting the apples to apples comparison. So we do find that devices that we install do have an impact on speeds and speed reduction. So when we there are streets that have maybe a more significant component within the network than just maybe a typical residential subdivision. We have streets out there that have a historic role within the community. We have streets that may carry a little more traffic at that higher end of that spectrum, towards that 4,000 cars a day. What do we do then? We've got a couple of great examples where we looked at 13th Street. We have a number of locations. This is Hyde Park. It's residential at the north and south ends from 4th Street up to Hill, where it turns into Hill Road past Camel's Back Park. A lot of bikes, a lot of peds, a lot of commercial activity, but the commercial section within the center of the corridor, that's got pretty good bulb outs. It's got fairly low speeds. It's at the north end and the south end that maybe have the greater concerns from the neighborhood. So we looked at this. We had a pretty significant public outreach, 3 meetings with the neighborhood itself, a couple of walking meetings where we looked at the corridor. They qualified based off of volume, not necessarily speed. But just some of the comments that we've had from the public, traffic calming is a Band-Aid for a much more serious issue. 13th Street is a gem of the North End. Speed bumps are a nuisance. So we're taking public comment into consideration when we're looking at those higher end streets, those ones that maybe stick out within maybe a neighborhood's memory a little more than just a residential street. So the nice thing about this is we're under design right now for some options. We're looking at bulb outs, a number of locations. We're putting a couple of additional enhanced crossings in. So we're looking at design this year, and then I believe in a couple of years we'll start building it. Another example is Kootenai Street, very similar to 13th Street, older neighborhood, kind of a good mix of residential and higher density stuff. We recommended a number of items. Again, the neighborhood didn't really want anything that had a vertical deflection, no speed humps. So we started looking at things like chicanes, like bulb outs, narrowing the vehicular travel lanes, and installing an RFB, sort of an enhanced pedestrian crossing for school traffic at Johnson Street. So to the best of my knowledge, this is going to be in design, I believe, starting in next year. So to summarize, when we looked at those criteria, speeds and volumes are still those key things we look at. You want to have something that's measurable, something that we can explain to the public as to why and how we do these sorts of things and why they do or don't qualify. We didn't find in our historic data collection any relationship between street width and speeds. And I withheld those graphs now just to not overwhelm anybody with a whole lot of data points. But we didn't really find that. And so we took away sort of that we were giving too much of a benefit to those really narrow streets when it really wasn't justified based on the data. We looked at differences in 20 versus 25 miles an hour. There wasn't a significant difference. There was maybe 1/10 of a mile an hour difference in the speeds at any end for looking at those in the streets between Boise and Meridian or Eagle. We found that neighborhood still needs to have that consensus. We can't just have one person being the sole individual who wants traffic calming on a given street. It needs to have a neighborhood component to it. So we do require that outreach to the affected residents. We do find that cut-through is still method as a valid of payment. So if you exceed a threshold where you're getting a lot of cut-through traffic from folks who don't live on your street, that kind of says to us that it's justified at district expense. I mean, you're getting sort of the short end of the stick, if you will, when it comes to more traffic on your streets than is probably justified based upon the classification. And certainly we still consider your 13th streets, your Kootenai streets, a higher level of engagement when we talk about those at the higher end of the spectrum. And I'll stand for any questions.
Thanks, Josh. Appreciate it. Commissioners, any questions? Commissioner Goldthorpe, you're leaning forward. Did you have a question or a comment? No? Okay.
Madam President?
Commissioner Hanson.
Yeah, thanks very much, Josh. That was good comment. I guess from the perspective of the neighborhood and the people who are all asking for it in their areas, the analysis, I think, has to approach it from the standpoint of the sense of safety of the pedestrians, cyclists, people using wheelchairs. And it's really frustrating for them when they see a project that goes in their neighborhood. A number of years ago, Burgesson, a good example. I actually took Gary Inselman and I went down there and watched it last fall. A bunch of crosswalks were repaved to give them correct ADA ramps. The speeds on that road. And sometimes, and in fact, when volumes are low, when there's not a lot of traffic, that's when people speed. There's an elementary school. There's a huge number of renters on that street. And so it just felt like, when we redid and spent the money to build the concrete and the ramps on all these corners, why didn't we consider putting in a few bulb outs so that pedestrians could be seen more? And in this area, there's also a lot of cycling that goes back and forth. So people, and Gary and I saw it, they cycle on the sidewalk because it's just not safe. Cars are going way too fast. I think that the whole premise of our policy, which is let's wait till the neighborhood gets organized and does a petition, is wrong, because what it does is, and I don't know that you intended to say these high-end streets. The impression I was given was high-end neighborhoods will be prioritized because they're likely to be organized, not have a lot of renters, recognize this, have the time to go door to door and collect all those signatures. I really have a problem with that part of our policy. But if we're going to be digging in those streets anyway, we're going to be repaving like on Hawaii. We're already going to be there. Why not go to those neighbors and do some analysis and find out what the perception of the speeds are? I know we don't use level of service for pedestrians, so we don't measure what the perception is, whether it feels safe or not. We're building a bunch of ADA ramps at Boise and Broadway with ITD. None of those have bulb outs, yet there's a school there. I don't know whether that analysis was done. It's the presence and the visibility of pedestrians that a bulb out, especially on a corner, provides people, not the width of the street so much as the signals to the drivers. There are people living here, walking here, people using wheelchairs who are going to come down this ramp. And when you make a very long crossing distance and there's nothing that impedes their view across the street, that's when they speed. So I really do like the Pedestrian Advisory Committee's approach, saying, let's look at this in all of our projects. When I submitted my comments on all of the community projects in my side of town, on the bench, Southeast Boise, the East End, I made specific comments about traffic calming being incorporated in the scope. From what I can tell, most of those haven't incorporated traffic calming into the scope of these projects. So I think we have to do that, and I think a good way of doing that is change the policy and say when you're dealing with collectors and when you're dealing with local streets especially, we like these gridded streets. They're good. We understand people are going to cut through, drive through. We just don't want them to drive through fast. And volume really has nothing to do with it. It really has to do with the perception of both the pedestrians, that they feel safe, and bicyclists, and with the drivers, that they feel like, well, there's no pedestrians around, there's no other people around, I can speed. Another street, Division, just got finished, a whole bunch of pedestrian ramps on each of these corners, not a single extruded curb or bulb out, which is so disappointing, because a couple blocks over, when we did the Leadville bikeway, we understood we wanted traffic to slow down a little bit, and we put curb extensions at the corner of Leadville and Highland, which work. It makes pedestrians visible, and it helps bicyclists realize they take the whole lane. So I think it's very important that we make this a priority, so that these streets through neighborhoods, of course, brand new neighborhoods are saying, we don't want gridded streets, because our experience is people drive fast as they cut through. And so as a result, the pattern is for a lot of these new neighborhoods is don't grid our streets so that people drive through and spread it out. Make them all funnel onto a nearby arterial so that we have a very, very little traffic in our neighborhood.
Those are good. Those are good points, Commissioner Hansen. And I think in reference to the pedestrian committee, their suggestion about the traffic calming up front, I think we are looking at doing things like that now in our scoping process. It's not as easy as one size fits all, but the more we can look at this up front, it makes more sense, less impact and disruption in the neighborhood, less money to go back then and have to retrofit. So all good items for further discussion. Thank you for doing that, bringing those up again today. I do want to say that I think safety is always in the forefront of everything that we're doing. And I would hesitate to walk away with the assumption that we are looking at high-end neighborhoods differently than any other neighborhood. I think we have a pretty level approach. So I just don't want to have that as a takeaway today. I don't know. I didn't exactly hear what Josh said, but I don't think that was the intent, and it's certainly not the objective of the projects that we do undertake. So, but some good discussion points. We're kind of running short on time, so I'm going to try to keep this moving. Do any other commissioners have any comments or questions for Josh? All right, seeing none. Josh, thank you very much. It gets better every time I see it.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
All right. So our last item for our work session is a 2020 CIP update, information only presentation by Austin Miller. Austin, welcome. I should say welcome back.
Thank you, Madam President. Commissioners, I did meet with you last week in my role as a planner, but I wanted to introduce myself again in my new role. For the record, Austin Miller. I am replacing Mitch as the Impact Fee Administrator.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Always nice to see you.
Thank you so much. Today, I'll be presenting an overview of ACHD's public outreach efforts, as well as a summary of the comments we have received, and update you to the change to the CIP since the last work session provided on July 15th. Mitch had previously discussed the commentary provided by the CICAC. However, I did want to reiterate, the CICAC has reviewed and given a unanimous recommendation of adoption for both the CIP and the associated impact fee ordinance. In addition to the representation on the CICAC, all 7 land use agencies were provided another opportunity to review the latest CIP draft and provide additional commentary. The City of Boise provided a letter requesting future discussions regarding the foundational elements of the impact fee ordinance, yet supporting the current proposed updates to the CIP. No additional comments have been submitted from the other cities or Ada County. The draft CIP was provided to 57 members of the development community and the Building Contractors Association of Southwestern Idaho for distribution. No comments have been received regarding the proposal. The full draft was made available for public comment on July 16th, and the comment period lasted 3 weeks, ending August 6th. The draft CIP was made available for review and comment on our website. Staff promoted input via Facebook, Nextdoor, Instagram, and Twitter. These postings provided a link to our blog article, the draft capital improvements plan, and associated comments sections. We received over 40 comments from social media, 3 comments via email, and received 1 phone call. None of the comments addressed a specific intersection or street section proposed or that they felt should be proposed in the draft CIP. After reviewing the comments, they can be summarized as follows. 2 questions did not pertain to the CIP, but were forwarded and answered by other members of the Highway District. 5 comments regarding roads, part of the state highway system. There were 4 comments regarding local streets, which, as you're aware, are not included in the CIP. 11 comments were regarding driving behaviors, 1 with just general support of bike lanes. 9 comments were regarding construction of existing or past projects, be it the phasing or design aspects. And then there were 14 comments that I just classified as others. Some of these included emojis, responses to somebody else's comment, or just general comments that didn't pertain to the proposed capital improvements plan. As I alluded earlier, there has been 1 change made to the CIP since your last briefing. The functional classification map was previously an exhibit. However, Commission approved master street map modifications are not reflected in the functional classification map, and this was creating some confusion. So to help avoid further confusion, the functional classification map has been removed. This is the final work session over the draft CIP. Staff has been working on the draft for a little over a year now. Prior work sessions have been provided on April 3rd, 2019, December 11th, 2019, and July 15th, 2020 to take direction from and provide an update to the Commission. Staff is preparing the final draft for the August 19th Commission meeting, which, as a reminder, I know Stacy mentioned it earlier, but that is a night meeting. And with that, I will stand for questions.
Madam President?
Thank you very much, Austin. And Commissioner Baker, go right ahead.
Yeah, Austin, great job. And you seem to have seamlessly fit into your new job, just from one week to the next. It's amazing. Just out of curiosity, is it possible for you to send us the comments, even though it appears that we really didn't receive any on the CIP, but it would be interesting to know what's on people's minds. Can you just email us those in a file or something?
Madam President, Commissioner Baker, I can absolutely do that.
Okay,
Perfect.
great. Thanks.
Perfect. I would like to see those as well. Thank you very much for that. Any other questions or comments?
Madam President?
Commissioner Hanson, go right ahead.
Yes, thanks, Austin. Appreciate you diving into this. The concerns I expressed in previous years regarding just automatically increasing the size of all these arterials up to 5 lanes with no effective modeling between the various options of 3 lanes or going up to 7 lanes instead of 5 lanes. We don't do modeling analysis on the impact of businesses. Often that means when we move forward with 5 or 7 lanes, we're restricting access, but we don't do business analysis, and that didn't change. We don't do an analysis of the pedestrian safety or level of service of pedestrians, whether they feel safer to cross or interact with a 5-lane versus a 3-lane, nor the livability of neighborhoods that are nearby, and many of these are going to be cutting right next to neighborhoods that have been put in. We also don't do any kind of outreach to do neighborhood consensus petitions or whatnot. We just finished talking about traffic calming, but we don't do any of that kind of direct connection with everybody in the neighborhood saying, here's the analysis of the livability of this option for your neighborhood. Our modeling is used mostly on level of service for cars passing by. So those are the same concerns that I raised in previous years with respect to the CIP, and I've been sitting on the CICAC meetings, listening to their discussion, so those concerns haven't been alleviated. Thank you, Austin.
All right, thank you. Any other comments or questions from the commissioners? All right, hearing none. Thank you very much. A lot of good information. Everybody enjoy the rest of your day and have a good rest of your week.
Madam President,
Director Wong, thank you.
if I could please, on one clarification, I know it was raised earlier. During the discussion on traffic calming, there was no comment made about high-end areas. It was in conjunction with high-end level of volumes of traffic. So there's been no discussion here at the operational staff regarding a high-end, low-end, and such. I want to make sure that was on the record and that you all heard that.
Thank you. I think that's what I was trying to address. I've heard this before, and so I just wanted to make sure I didn't hear anything. So I just want to make sure everybody has the right impression. So, but a lot of good input. I think some of that traffic calming discussions can take place and hopefully be addressed during the scoping. So I think those were good points. So thank you, everyone. We stand adjourned. Have a great rest of the day.
Well done.